Fomorian. Hello everyone, Sick DM Dungeon Mastery here. I've failed my con save in real life, and I'm not doing so hot right now, but I'm on the grind, and I'm here to present to you my Fomorian rework. I like the Fomorians. I think they're really cool monsters. I think these are the first giant that I've ever ran before when I first started playing D&D. And my friends all have very memorable experiences from these giants on account of their cruelty and just the sheer amount of ways you can make these sound as grotesque and creepy as humanly possible. I want to look at the 2014 stat block first before we look at mine, and I just want to see if they have any representation of the Fomorians' cruelty within its stat block. So let's get into it. It's a huge giant. They are chaotic evil. I agree with the alignment being evil, but chaotic in a way to me feels wrong only because they do enslave creatures. And I feel like a chaotic creature wouldn't enslave others and make them do the work for them. That's more of a lawful evil thing, even though they are quite vile. Maybe it's not, but I chose lawful evil for my Fomorians. We move into the armor class. They have an AC of 14, and that's natural armor, so these are quite hardy creatures naturally. Hit points of 149, 13d12, a speed of 30 feet. Here's one giant where I actually do sort of agree with the speed being much lower than other giants, and here's why. Fomorians are deformed. They are deformed and malformed. They are mangled, walking, Hunchback of Notre Dame-esque giants, but they are, on top of all of that, incredibly cruel. So I don't feel like these would be moving with the same elegance and stride as a normal giant would be. So you're going to see what I did with mine. Let's look at the ability scores. 23 strength, 10 dex, 20 con, 9 intelligence, 14 wisdom, and 6 charisma. I think the dex should be lower than 10, to be honest. To represent them being malformed, I think it should be in the negatives. It should be at least a 9 or a 7 at the lowest. I may have been lower than that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. We'll have to wait till we look at my stat block. Let's move into the senses and all of that, the stats. This is a creature that has a dark vision of 120 feet. That's pretty far out. Not as good as my stone giant, but these are Fey Underdark giants, so having a large dark vision radius is pretty good. They have a perception skill. It does state in their lore that they have a very easy time at catching creatures sneaking up on them, so I do agree with that, and they do have a stealth score. And it says in their combat tactics on the wiki that they do indeed like to sneak up and stealth attack creatures, even though they're really big, and it doesn't really... It's hard to describe it with them being as mangled as they are described being. Like, how are they sneaking if they're, like, dragging their club foot along the ground? But I suppose it's possible. They speak giant and undercommon, so if you don't speak giant or undercommon, there is no communicating with these things. And they are a CR 8, which is pretty high for a baseline commoner giant. Let's move into the actions. So we got multi-attack. The Fomorian attacks twice with its Great Club, or makes one Great Club and uses its Evil Eye once. So we have the classic giant Great Club attack, but it's just it doesn't say huge Great Club, which offends me. It does have a reach of 15 feet, which is pretty far. I'm not sure why it has a reach of 15 feet. It doesn't really state the reasoning behind that. They can deal 3d8 bludgeoning damage on a hit. Now, this giant surprisingly doesn't fall victim too harshly to the other giants' downfalls, which is their lack of things to do in combat, but this giant can't throw a rock, so it has no ranged no consistent ranged damage other than its evil eye, which is arguably better because it does psychic damage. It's described that they are too mangled and malformed to even throw boulders like their giant cousins, which I do like that. I really am taking that into account when I'm thinking about reworking this creature. It's mangled, it should be lumbering, very cumbersome to move around, just a generally pitiful creature. Let's look at Curse of the Evil Eye. Well, actually, let's look at Evil Eye first. So, the Fomorian magically forces a creature it can see within 60 feet to make a DC 14 Charisma save. The creature takes 6d8 psychic damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. So that's a pretty good output of damage. Barbarians are going to struggle against this monster, but I like that. It's pretty unique to this giant specifically. No other giants do psychic damage. Now let's look at Curse of the Evil Eye. This is a cool ability. This is just what an average Fomorian can do, keep in mind also, so that's pretty scary. So with a stare, the Fomorian uses Evil Eye, but on a failed save, the creature is also cursed with magical deformities. While deformed, the creature has its speed halved and has disadvantage on ability checks, saving throws, and attacks based on strength or dexterity. The transformed creature can repeat the saving throw whenever it finishes a long rest, ending the effect on a success. I would argue that Remove Curse would also remove that because it says Curse in the name. But other than that, the Fomorian can't do anything else. It is not one-dimensional, but it's two-dimensional because it really only has two things that it can do. Not that that's the worst thing in the world, at least it has these cool, flavorful things it can do. But I came up with 3 different variations of the Fomorian. I added some stuff based on their lore to their stat block, and I looked at some of the 4E monster manuals for inspiration for the 3 that I've come up with. So let's jump into mine and see what I did different. Alright, so before we jump into my rework, I just want to read a bit of an excerpt from the 2014 monster manual about the Fomorians, so you can get a feel of what we're working with here. So the most hideous and wicked of all giant kind are the godless Fomorians, whose deformed bodies reflect their vile demeanors. Some have facial features randomly distributed around their misshapen, warty heads. Others have limbs of grossly different sizes and shapes, or emit terrible howls each time they draw breath through their misshapen mouths. Their wretched appearance rarely evokes sympathy, however, for the Fomorians brought their doom upon themselves with the evil that rules their hearts and minds. So, that tells you that Fomorians are utterly cruel, conniving, evil creatures. They are pitiful, cruel, and conniving. That's the big 3 things that we need to remember. So, let's look at my Fomorian. This is going to be the commoner version of the Fomorians. This is what the average everyday Fomorian is. I put Fey and commoner in the tag because Fomorians are giants, but they are also Fey giants. So that will also give you the benefit of any spell that has anything that states this happens to a Fey creature. They benefit from that, or they don't benefit, because this is bad if you target them with that. So I did not do anything to the AC or the HP. I did increase the speed to 45, but not to 60, like my other giants. That's important. They should not be moving at a 60-foot movement speed with how mangled they are according to their lore, so I did not want to give them incredibly fast movement speed. We have the strength scores, well, the ability scores in general have not changed. I did increase the wisdom. Actually, I lied to you. I increased the wisdom to 15 from what it was at before, because it says it kind of mentions how perceptive they are to things, and I feel like they would be wise, but in an evil way. I did increase the CR to 13, so that's gonna increase everything else alongside of that, but out of the stats and into the special traits we go. So first things first, we have Embodiment of Evil. The Fomorian embodies pure evil, and its curses are a reflection of this malevolence. While under the effects of protection from evil and good, creatures are immune to the Fomorian's evil eye-related abilities. So that's essentially your ace in the hole when you are preparing to take on Fomorians. You want protection from evil and good, because these are incredibly evil creatures. They are also Fae, so that might be redundant, but I just wanted to have something on there that states that you would be immune to their evil eye ability specifically. The second thing is Fae Anathema. The Fomorian harbors a long, deep-seated hatred for all Fae creatures. And what this translates to is all Fae have disadvantage on charisma checks against the Fomorian. The Fomorian is immune to charm and fear effects from Fae. When a Fae creature within 10 feet uses a racial teleportation ability, the Fomorian can make an opportunity attack. If it hits, the creature must succeed on a DC 19 Constitution saving throw, or the teleport fails and the creature is stunned until the end of its next turn. That's not a free action, by the way, that still requires its reaction. But normally, if you use a teleportation ability, you can't make a attack of opportunity on something because it's not using its movement, it's literally teleporting away. But the Fomorians, if it's a Fae creature that uses that ability, can actually make an attack of opportunity, unless the creature disengages. So disengage is how you get around that. We have Ambusher. The Fomorian has advantage on attack rolls against any creature it has surprised, so again, I got that from their lore. They tend to ambush creatures in their combat tactics. It states that. So let's go ahead and get into the actions now, shall we? Alrighty. So the Fomorian's got a lot more it can do, and keep in mind, cruelty is the name of the game here. Everything that it's doing is in the name of cruelty. So the multi-attack states it can make 2 slam or great club attacks and may replace one of these with a stomp or use of evil eye. So let's get into the huge great club that I aptly renamed. I did reduce the range on this, so it's 10 feet instead of 15 now. I don't know why it had 15 feet of reach to begin with, because no other giants have that far reach, and they're malformed, so you would think their arms would even be shorter anyway, so you could even argue they should have 5 feet of reach. So anyways, on a hit, it does 3d8 bludgeoning damage. Large or smaller creatures take an additional 3d4 non-magical psychic damage and are concussed. And concussed states that the creature can't take reactions. It loses its AC to its dexterity, if it has any, until the end of their next turn. Pretty nasty. They purposefully are targeting the head when they go to swing, and 3d4 non-magical psychic damage could get... It's rare, but you could get around it somehow if you had resistance to non-magical damage. But anyways, let's move into Mangling Slam now. So this is a fist attack, but instead of them punching, they're slamming the fist down onto the creature. It does 3d6 bludgeoning damage. Large or smaller creatures are mangled when hit by this, which means their movement speed is reduced by half until it receives magical healing. Pretty nasty. You're not gonna be able to kite around this guy too easy if he starts slamming you and targeting your limbs, purposefully trying to hurt you so you can't leave. Imagine if he does this to some Fae creatures that he has enslaved, and they try to get away from them while they mangling slam them so they can't run away. Yeah, pretty vile. I could imagine if you have like a scenario where your player characters are watching a Fomorian city from the distance, and there's a bunch of groups of enslaved Fae creatures. See them like toiling in some sort of mushroom forest, gathering food for the Fomorians. You could see a lot of them have broken limbs or splinted up body parts that they have from previous attempts of escape. So that's a way you can kind of hammer home that the Fomorians are vile, evil creatures. Okay, moving on. We have the Evil Eye ability. I didn't make any changes other than to the wording of the ability so that it's worded a lot more clean, so you could just quickly scan over it, see what it does on a failure or a success. Bam, you can move on to the next ability. And without further ado, any Stomp enjoyers in the chat? Stomp enjoyers, rise up. We're moving into Stomp, ladies and gentlemen. This is a classic ability on all my giants. Affects large or smaller creatures. You must succeed on a DC 19 strength save or you fall prone. Now, however, the Fomorian is a little different from other giants because Fomorians are, like I said, very cruel, conniving, evil creatures. So the Fomorian, if he slams his foot down on you, he can move into your space now and keep you pinned to the ground with his foot on top of you. So while you're pinned this way, you're considered grappled and restrained, and you take 3d4 bludgeoning damage at the start of each of your turns while you're being crushed. The creature can use its action to escape with a DC 19 strength save, moving to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of the Fomorian on a success, and the Fomorian cannot use Stomp while pinning a creature, obviously. So that's a pretty new take on Stomp. I almost want to give that to the Cyclops too, just so it has something like that, because Cyclopses are known to be a little cruel. But let's move on to Curse of the Evil Eye. So I didn't make any changes to Curse of the Evil Eye. I already think it's a cool ability. It should stay exactly how it is, but I did change the wording and the actual ability itself to 1/per rest, so you know that on a short or a long rest, this recharges. Now, the Fomorian does have Snatch, of course, like all my other giants, but the Fomorian's Snatch bonus actions work differently. So let me read Snatch for those of you who are not aware, and this is your first time seeing my big giant creatures. So essentially, the Fomorian lunges his hand towards a creature attempting to grab it. The creature has to make a DC 19 dex save or be grappled and restrained. So yes, that gets around armor class. It doesn't matter if you have a shit ton of plate armor on. A Fomorian should be able to just grab you. He is 2 sizes larger than you. I don't think there's any argument there. So while he's holding you in that hand, he can't grapple another creature with that hand or swing his two-handed weapons until the grapple ends, but two-handed weapons can still be held in the opposite hand. They just cannot be swung. So let's move into the bonus actions. So in the bonus actions, these are all going off of the Snatch ability. Of course, Crush and Smash are here still. Those haven't changed. They still deal 3d6 bludgeoning damage with Crush, and the creature remains grappled, so he just starts squeezing you while he's holding you, starts squashing you and squeezing you like a toothpaste bottle, essentially. Visualize that if you want to get a gruesome image in your head. And then we have Smash. It does 4d6 bludgeoning damage, and then the creature has to make a con save. On a failure, the target is stunned until the end of its next turn, but you land prone and the grapple ends when he uses this. So it's like he's slamming you into the side of a building, the side of a wall and a cavern, a pillar and some ruins. So that's the downside. It does more damage and it stuns, but it drops you, which I guess some would argue that's not really a downside, because then he can start hitting you with his weapons again, but that's just a way to quickly follow up with that ability and then drop the creature if he wants to keep swinging that great club. Fey Rend. This is the first unique grapple ability, so this can only be used on Fey creatures. The Fomorian tears into the flesh of a grappled Fey creature. The target takes 5d8 slashing damage, and the creature's body is ravaged, suffering an additional 3d8 necrotic damage at the start of each of its turns until it receives magical healing, and the creature remains grappled. So, if you've ever seen the Silent Hill movie, picture when Pyramid Head grabs that girl and he literally rips her skin off. That's kind of what's happening here. That's what I envisioned when I made this ability. Pretty brutal, pretty fitting for such a creature. Let's get into the final one. This is Limb Ripper. This is another cruel, evil, conniving ability. So the Fomorian viciously twists and pulls at the limbs of a grappled creature. It deals 5d10 bludgeoning damage, and one of its limbs or wings is dislocated, rendering it unusable until magically healed. If this damage reduces the creature to 0 hit points, the limb is ripped off entirely. The creature remains grappled. And then I have a little thing that says for leg dislocation, it's half movement speed for one leg or 0 for both. Arm dislocation, they lose the use of one arm. If they have a two-handed weapon and they lose the use of one arm, they cannot swing that weapon anymore. Keep that in your back of your head. Make sure you remember the rules for stuff like that whenever you use a creature like this, otherwise you're going to be kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And then we have wing dislocation. If he's in the Feywild or the Feydark, he's going to probably be fighting a lot of things that can fly. So if he dislocates one of the wings, the fly speed becomes 0 until it gets repaired with healing. Or, even worse, if it reduces it to 0 hit points, it rips the wing off entirely, and you have to use regenerate or something to reattach that wing. So that's going to conclude the regular commoner Fomorian. This is what the average Fomorian can do in the world of D&D. Absolutely terrifying, as it should be. I don't think we should pull any punches when we do giant stat blocks, especially something like a Fomorian. You should represent its savage brutality in its stat block, like I have. And this one's not super complicated to run either. It's pretty straightforward. It just has a lot of debilitating effects that it can apply to a creature. Let's move on to the second variant of the Fomorians that I have made. So, if I just showed you the commoner Fomorian, this is what a Fomorian warrior is. So, I put in the tags, it's a Fey soldier this time. So this is like the more well-trained Fomorians. I picture these to be hand-picked by whatever Fomorian royalty or king decides, and these are the ones that guard the actual cities or their caverns that they reside in. So you'll see the first change, they actually have armor on this time. So these Fomorians have an AC of 18 and they have a shield. Their hit points are up by 2 die, so they have 172 hit points. Much more hardy, much stronger than a commoner Fomorian. Now, I did give this one saving throw proficiencies also, so this has a plus 11 strength save, plus 10 con, plus 8 wisdom. I kind of want to go back through all my giants and give other variations of like giant versions of the warrior giants, you know, some sage giants, just other variations, but I have to give other creatures some love too, otherwise I'd be making like 40 different giant videos and then everybody would get bored with me. But anyways, let's go into the special traits. So this Fomorian has one extra special trait. This one has Merciless Tormentor. The Fomorian deals an extra 3d4 psychic damage against creatures that are immobilized. A creature with 0 movement speed / a creature that cannot move due to a condition or other factor is what counts as an immobilized creature. So with Merciless Tormentor in mind, we can kind of see now if these warrior Fomorians disable you in some way or immobilize you, they start dealing a lot of damage, and that's all psychic damage, which is nearly in D&D 5e, it's true damage in a way, because there's really barely any creatures that resist psychic damage. Unless you're like a Githyanki, I believe they might have resistance to psychic damage. But let's look at this giant's weaponry and actions. So this Fomorian has a huge mace, and I got the mace from a lot of the older artwork of the Fomorian. There's a lot of them holding these really big maces. So this Fomorian is a lot more dangerous because I'm imagining these Fomorians are using more tactics rather than just savage brutality as the commoners. So on a hit with this, it still does the same extra 3d4 non-magical psychic damage and it concusses the creature. However, if the creature's already concussed, it has to make it has to make a DC 19 con save, and on a failure the creature is now incapacitated until the end of its next turn instead of just concussed. So yeah, it starts to snowball a little bit and it makes them quite dangerous. So how do you get around this? Heat metal targeting the mace, make the Fomorian drop the weapon. Okay, it's not overpowered if you use proper tactics. Like I always say, my creatures are difficult, but there are ways to get around that difficulty, always. Smart players will definitely be able to handle these if they're high enough level, first of all, because you don't want to start throwing these creatures at low level parties, at least not multiple of them. But also keep in mind this Fomorian's challenge rating is up to higher than the commoner Fomorian. So this Fomorian, if we move along the actions here, has a ranged weapon now. This Fomorian has a huge bolas, and I got this out of their lore too. I like to read through the lore and pick out weapons that they use. So if an enslaved creature is trying to run away down a cavern, they're gonna pull out this bolas and they're gonna throw it within 20 to 60 feet of that creature, and if they get hit, they get restrained by this bolas. So this is a fitting thing. Now it's not a boulder, so they're not overhead throwing it, they're sort of whipping it to the side. So that's how I envisioned them being able to use this weapon. And other than that, the warrior Fomorians don't have anything else unique about them other than their challenge rating is increased. They have a different weapon that they can use to greater effect than the commoner Fomorians, and they have a bolas attack that they can throw creatures that are at range. So they have more militaristic like equipment on them essentially, and it lets them utilize that to more of a devastating effect. Let's look at the final version of the Fomorians, and I think this one is going to blow your guys' socks off. Alright, so this completely flips the Fomorian playstyle onto its head. This is a Fomorian Painbringer. It states that Fomorians can become warlocks typically. They used to be spellcasters before they were mutated by this curse that they have. So this is a very juiced up, very powerful, very scary, very dangerous Fomorian. Keeping in mind, this Fomorian's 9 times out of 10 not going to be by itself. There's going to be other commoner Fomorians around it or Fomorian warriors around them. So yeah, lots of things to deal with on top of this creature. But you'll see it's a Fey Mage. So this is a spellcaster Fomorian. It's fairly focused on spellcasting, but it doesn't have spells, as you'll see. So this Fomorian has little to no armor. It has an 11 AC. Its hit points are 123, much lower than the other Fomorians, and its speed is the lowest out of all the other Fomorians. So that's already 3 downsides right there. Moving into its ability scores, it's got much lower strength, and I gave it very low dex because I'm envisioning these are the Fomorians that are so grotesquely mangled and mutated that they can barely walk. They are the least dexterous out of all the Fomorian race, but this is why they have turned from, instead of being melee fighters and torturers, they have turned into mastering their evil eye abilities. So you can see their con is much lower also. So that's 3 downsides over the other Fomorians, 6 total if you count all the other stuff. But the intelligence, the wisdom are both 20, so much higher intelligence and wisdom. The charisma is very low also, so it's got ability scores that you can target as its weaknesses, and it's got low armor class, lower health, slow speed for a giant. Let's look at the saving throws. Intelligence, wisdom, charisma, saving throws, proficiencies, so all mental related stats. I think that makes sense, being that it is a pseudo spellcaster. It's got Arcana, Insight, Perception, and Stealth proficiency, and I made this one a CR 17. So remember, it's not just this creature by itself if you're fighting this, unless you could somehow section it off away from its other kin. But if you're going into a city, you're probably going to run into these. But keep in mind, I imagine a Fomorian Painbringer to be like maybe 1 in every 30 Fomorians becomes a Painbringer. So trying to balance it out with the rarity of the creature. Let's get into the special traits. It has Embodiment of Evil and Fey Anathema still, but this time it has magic resistance. So to counterbalance its very weak melee skills, it has magic resistance that helps it against other spellcasters. So I imagine if they capture sorcerers or other fae creatures that are known for casting spells and trying to do little tricksy fae things, these guys have specialized in thwarting those creatures. Okay, so moving into the actions, completely different creature mechanically. You're not going to see the same type of movements and things that it's going to do on a turn that a commoner or a soldier Fomorian would do. So it does have a weapon in case that you somehow disable its magical abilities, which you could say probably if it's in an anti-magic field, it probably wouldn't be able to use its evil eye, but that's up to you as the dungeon master to decide. But let's look at the huge flail. So flails, bludgeoning weapons, those are the most common things that Fomorians use. So we got a great club, a mace, and a flail so far out of all the equipment between the 3 Fomorians. So this one does, against larger, smaller creatures, they have to succeed on a DC 15 strength save or they fall prone, but if they succeed, they remain standing. So they still take damage if they get hit. It's got a much lower hit than the other Fomorians too, only +7 compared to the, I think the other ones were +11 or +12, much higher. So this guy's not really a melee fighter. This is a mage. But let's get into the first big change here. Curse of the Evil Eye now recharges on a 6. It's not just a once per day ability. This creature has mastered the art of cursing creatures with its Curse of the Evil Eye. So on a recharge of 6, the Fomorian can reuse its Evil Eye. And if the save now fails by 5 or more on this ability, the creature's speed becomes 0 and it cannot move until the curse is cured. Which, mind you, remove curse, it's a pretty low level spell. By the time they're fighting this creature, the cleric has removed curse. You probably want to have them, or it's going to be really up to them to do their research before fighting Fomorians. Especially, they're not going to run into a Painbringer Fomorian just out and about in the wild. They would only run into one of these inside of a Fomorian city, more likely than not. So don't have to really worry about just getting into contact with one of these at random, in a random chart or a random encounter. This is like, you are going into a Fomorian city, you're probably going to run into one of these at least. So, yeah. Cursing creatures already, that makes it much more formidable. It probably is going to get this off a couple times in the fight at least, so it could curse multiple creatures. Along with all the other Fomorians that can use this ability, so that's pretty scary. Pretty scary indeed. Let's go to the second big curse. Now this is its replacement for the once a day curse. This is Curse of the Feeble Mind. And I took the Feeble Mind spell and I put it as a once per day ability on the Fomorian. Keeping all of this stuff in mind, that if you are under the protection of protection from evil and good, you're immune to the Fomorian's evil eye related abilities. I think that's the correct one, not the spell evil and good. Yeah, that's the higher level, the 5th level one. If it's not the 5th level one, I'm going to change it to whatever the 5th level version of it is. There's 2 different variants. I can't remember which one is which off the top of my head. But, so let me read this ability for you. The Fomorian's eye becomes a dark void of malevolence and blasts the mind of a creature attempting to shatter its intellect and personality. So pretty brutal. Target within 60 feet must make a DC 19 intelligence save. Not a lot of creatures are going to pass that, but this is only once per day. On a failure, the creature's intelligence and charisma score becomes 1. The creature can't cast spells, activate magic items, understand language, or communicate in any intelligible way. The creature can, however, identify its friends, follow them, and even protect them. The creature can repeat the save at the end of every 30 days, or it can be restored with Remove Curse, Greater Restoration, Heal, or Wish. So it's a slightly weaker version of Feeble Mind because Remove Curse gets rid of it. Because it is a curse at the end of the day. But this is a curse-slinging Fomorian. This isn't the big draw of this creature, though. Let's get into the big ability that's going to need its own section. Alright, so remember when I mentioned that these Fomorians can make pacts with evil deities like a warlock and gain powers or learn how to utilize their evil eye more consistently. Also remembering that we'll say 1 in every 30 Fomorians can only become a Painbringer, so it has to be the most weak runt of the Fomorians that chooses to dedicate itself to learning these abilities. So anyways, Pact of Pain. The Fomorian targets up to 2 creatures it can see within 60 feet with its evil eyes. The creature suffers one of the following effects. The Fomorian cannot use the same effect twice on the same turn against the same creature. So, it's like a beholder. You can target one creature twice, but you can't use the same quote-unquote eye ray. So this was inspired by a beholder. Much scary. Honestly, it's probably a little scarier than a beholder, which now I'm going to have to go in and rework the beholder and make them much more scary. But anyways, let's look at the first one. So this is familiar to you, excuse me. This is Evil Eye. It's the same charisma save. On a failure, the creature takes, instead of 6d8, it's 8d8 psychic damage. On a success, they take half damage. And these are all worded very concisely for you. They're not hard to understand. Everything's abbreviated. And then I made sure these flowed really good. So you can't yell at me and say that this is too much, hopefully. But you could take, I'd say the sweet spot for this Pact of Pain ability is maybe 6 abilities, 4 to 6 abilities. I gave it either 8 or 10. So there's a lot of things, but I'm going to keep it to what I have on here because my players have a lot of really strong magic items. So I like to challenge them. If you like to hand out magic items a lot and let your players feel powerful, why not throw big powerful monsters at them? Anyways, so Evil Eye, we have Painful Visions. This is a DC 19 Wisdom save. The creature takes 4d8 psychic damage on a failure and is paralyzed for 1 minute. Now you have a couple Warrior Fomorians who deal extra psychic damage to creatures that are immobilized. Paralyzed counts as that, and it's an automatic crit. So that's the scariest one, I think, on the stat block, and it can just reuse this like every turn. You could use, so for an example, you can target 2 different creatures with the same Evil Eye ability at the top, or you can target 2 different creatures with Painful Visions, but you can't choose Painful Visions to hit the same creature twice. So if you chose one creature for 2 Pact of Pain abilities, you would have to choose one and then a second one that's separate, just to keep that. It explains that in the ability, but just in case that's confusing to some people, can't target the same creature with the same ability. It has to be 2 separate abilities if you target only one creature with 2 of the same Pact of Pains, or 2 Pact of Pains abilities. Sorry, now I'm stumbling over my own words, but let's keep moving before my head explodes here. We got Soul Crusher for the 3rd ability in this. This is a DC 19 con save. On a failure, the creature takes 5d8 necrotic damage and is slowed for 1 minute. Speed is halved, -2 to its AC, and dex saves can only use 1 action or bonus action per turn. Repeat the save at the end of each turn to end this ability, but it lasts for 1 minute. And then on a success, you take half damage and you resist the slow effect. So you would only take half of 5d8 and you don't get slowed if you succeed. Pretty self-explanatory. I feel like I worded these pretty well. I'm going to try to make sure I word stuff like this from now on for a lot of my things so they're not incredibly overwhelming. Funnel Pain. This is another 19 con save. The creature takes 5d8 necrotic damage and the Fomorian regains HP equal to the damage dealt. On a success, the Fomorian still deals half damage and regains half of that HP. So that's its heal ability. It's got very low health, but it can use Funnel Pain to kind of sustain itself. And you can choose Funnel Pain twice as long as you're targeting 2 separate creatures. So yeah, pretty strong, pretty nasty creature. Again, you could take some of these out if you disagree with them, but these are just all the things that I came up with for this Painbringer Fomorian. Let's go to Veil of Agony. This was a 4E ability, I believe. It wasn't called Veil of Agony, but I took it from 4E. So the creature takes, on a failed DC 19 Wisdom save, the creature takes 5d8 psychic damage, and the Fomorian is invisible to the creature for 1 minute. If you succeed on a DC 19 Perception check, you can end that ability. And on a success, you only take half damage, and the Fomorian remains visible. So you got a spellcaster trying to cast Disintegrate. he turns himself invisible towards the spellcaster. Spellcaster has no target, so he can't cast Disintegrate at this creature. It's got ways to defend itself, and this is one of them. Or the fighter wants to make attacks against it, and now it's invisible, so the fighter's attacking at disadvantage, having a harder time hitting it, or doesn't know where it's at, and he's going to have to make perception checks to try to find it with his hearing, not his sight. We have Muted Torment next. This is DC 19 Charisma save. On a failure, the creature takes 5d8 psychic damage, and the target is blinded, deafened, and unable to speak for 1 minute. We repeat the save at the end of each turn to end this ability, and the creature on a success only takes half damage, resists the effects. So going forward, if you succeed the save, you're probably going to take half damage and resist whatever effect comes with this. Now here's a scary one. This is the anti-spellcaster ability. This is Befuddling Gaze. So this is a DC 19 int save. Failure. The creature takes 3d10 psychic damage. The target cannot cast leveled spells or concentrate on them for 1 minute. Sorry, there's an ambulance outside of my house or something. Apologize for the noise. The creature repeats the save to end, takes half damage on a success, resists the effects, but that's scary. That's a scary ability. That was one I was thinking maybe I shouldn't put this on the stat block, but you know what? We are here to combat the power creep, so I'm here to save you with creatures like this. Let's get into the final ability here, because the Fomorian does not have any melee abilities. You notice there was no stomp or anything, because this creature is so malformed and so just so malformed, yeah, that's the correct wording, that it can't stomp or punch or do anything. It's gonna have to grab creatures by using this ability now. So this is a DC 19 strength save. On a failure, the creature takes 5d10 bludgeoning damage and is pulled 30 feet towards the Fomorian. If it's within 5 feet after the pull happens, the creature is grappled and restrained, and they can escape, obviously, but that's the replacement to Snatch. So there's no Snatch, there's no Stomp. I know, I'm sorry, Stomp enjoyers, but this creature is too malformed to use those abilities. It has completely gone down the route of spellcasting. And we'll move into the bonus actions really quickly. Everything is the same other than Diabolical Gaze. So the Fomorian holds the creature up to its evil eye, scrutinizing every weakness and pressure point, and its mind swells with malevolent insight. So that creature now has to succeed on a DC 19 Charisma save. On a failure, the creature becomes exposed. And what exposed means is it's vulnerable to all damage dealt by the Fomorian for 1 hour. If the Fomorian exposes another creature, the previous one is no longer exposed, but if you have removed Curse, that ends the effect early, but the creature does remain grappled. Excuse me, fumbling my words here. But that is sort of like the Fomorian is studying the creature, learning which best way to torture it. And I think that's going to conclude my Fomorian reworks. I think this is the cleanest triple rework I've done, because each creature represents a different creature in the class system of their society. So you have the mages, your warriors, and your commoners. There's definitely more you can make, like slave driver Fomorians, because they do enslave creatures, unfortunately. So I wanted to make that, but I wanted to get this video out. So if I do a follow-up video of Fomorians, I might add a slave driver Fomorian with a ginormous spiked whip that does have 15 feet of reach and could probably pull you prone, pull you up to him. But I hope these gave you guys some ideas for if you were running a Fomorian fight or a Fomorian city. If you go into the Fey Dark at all, be wary, because these creatures are there and they want to torture you. So that is going to be DM Dungeon Mastery for today. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please come join me in the Discord, where you can download all these stat blocks for free. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.